Pelicans fall to the Oklahoma City Thunder, but there was a secret bright spot. You might not believe me, but there really was one that the Pelicans should be able to take advantage of going forward, and it might just be the thing that gets them back to winning ways as soon as this weekend. I'll tell you what it is in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with you on this Thursday, day after the Pelicans fall to the Oklahoma City Thunder, 106-88, sixth straight loss, I think it is, for the New Orleans Pelicans right now. And while we don't want to focus too much on the result, there was something that the Pelicans did really well in this game. Offensive rebounding that they might be able to take advantage of against the Denver Nuggets, against the Lakers, and get back to winning ways quicker. This put the blueprint out there for it, and I'm going to break it down for you in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. And of course, become an everydayer of Locked On Pelicans. Make this your first listen. And being an everydayer means you are listening Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans. If you're still an everydayer, let me know in the comments down below. We got a lot to talk about after a game where maybe we shouldn't have, but we know what is interesting about this. We're going to break it all down. I then want to get into taking care of the ball, avoiding turnovers, because that was a big problem in this game. We'll look at a couple of good performances from some of the guys here in this one as well. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the number one Pelicans podcast out there that you want to know about. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Game Time, my go-to ticketing app here. Today, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. So let's get into this one. It was a 106-88 loss to the Oklahoma City Thunder. And look, we're not expecting the Pelicans to win right now. Like, we really aren't. They were 14.5-point underdogs in this game. Think about that for a second. 14.5 points. That's a lot. That's a lot. And they lost by nearly 20. But they were competitive in this game, and this is going to be the theme and has been the theme going forward. Look, there's 100 points in street clothes for New Orleans. Zion Williamson, CJ McCollum, Herb Jones, DeJounte Murray, and Jose Alvarado. Right? Like, that's a lot of impactful players that would make this team better. And there's enough talent here when if they were healthy, they would be good. But they're not. You're going to lose games. It's just really as simple as that. What we're looking for now is what can they do going forward to just try and win some games. We'll talk about pivoting to a tank and trying to play for the number one overall pick, but that's not what this team's going to do right now, at least not yet. They're going to try and win. And in this one, they actually had a pretty smart game plan. So while they played it close, look, talent's going to win out at the end here, and that's what happened in this game. But they had a pretty good game plan going against a admittedly small Oklahoma City Thunder team of let's crash the offensive glass and try and get second chance points. In this game, the Pelicans had 21 offensive rebounds here. And they turned that into, where did the number just go? 26 second chance points. For a team that's going to struggle to score, getting second chance opportunities, which are not always, but more often than not, just like easy tip-ins, putbacks, is a good way to go about trying to score some. You know, it allowed the Pelicans to maintain, be competitive in terms of points in the paint. One of the areas that they've struggled with, they tied that battle 42-42 here with the Oklahoma City Thunder. There were two areas that the Pelicans really lost in this game, and one of them you can do something about, the other one not as much, I think. So crashing the offensive glass honestly seems like a good game plan here. Yves Missi did a very good job of this. 4 of his 10 rebounds were offensive rebounds. Brandon Boston Jr. was attacking the offensive glass. He had 4. Jeremiah Robinson Earl grabbed 2. Trey Jemison, who got significant minutes in this one, had 4 himself. You had 6 players with at least 2 or more offensive rebounds. That's a good strategy. OKC is small right now. They don't have Isaiah Hartenstein, who's out injured. They haven't had him all season. They don't have Chet Holmgren, who just went down with an injury as well. So they're playing kind of small, and they relied on J-Dub basically being their starting center, and he's undersized for that role at 6 foot. What is he? He's 6 foot, 6'5", 6'6", was basically their starting center. His wingspan's insane. But this was a good game plan. And when you look ahead to their next couple of opponents, the Denver Nuggets and then the Los Angeles Lakers, those are two teams that aren't elite at defensive rebounding. The Denver Nuggets rank, as of right now, when I'm recording this, 14th in terms of defensive rebounding percentage. The Lakers are 18th. Neither team is in the top 10 when it comes to defensive rebounding. You might be able to take advantage of this and basically steal a win that you have no business getting. This was a good game plan from the Pelicans to play big and try and crash that glass. Now, it didn't work out because, again, talent's ultimately going to win out right now, more so than scheme, more so than whatever offensive philosophy, whatever it is, right? Like, this team is competitive for a little while, and then they just run out of gas because you have guys that aren't supposed to be playing this big of a role. Look, Jeremiah Robinson-Earl is not a 24-minute per game guy in the NBA, and he's playing more than that right now. Jamal Cain, who's on a two-way, has no business playing 19 minutes in the NBA. Trey Jemison, over 17, almost 18 minutes. Jalen Noel, who was signed on a 10-day, played 26 minutes in this game, right? Javonte Green was signed for a minimum, 27 minutes. We like him, though. You know, some of these guys just aren't this kind of caliber of player. And I saw someone comment, and I want to address it in this way the other day on the show, or and they were like, well, if you can get a lead, you should maintain it the whole game. Like, no, that's not how this works. You know, I go back to something with Drew Holiday from a number of years ago when he was on the team. The team realized that he was good in like 8-minute increments. And the second he started going over 8 minutes, his production dipped significantly. So they only played him in 8-minute stretches because they realized that's when he was at his peak, that he needed to come out for a rest. Then you put him back in. But if you played 9 minutes, 10 minutes, those 9th and 10th minutes were real rough, and you could lose the game here. Sometimes guys are just like good enough for X amount of minutes and no more than that. And that's what the Pelicans have, but they're forced into bigger roles. You can say it's a next man up mentality, but it doesn't exactly work that way. It's just not as simple as being like, yeah, you can maintain it for all 48 minutes. No, this team's really good for, not really good, but this team is competitive, let's say, for 60% of the game. Not a full 48 minutes, but 60%. That'll keep you competitive till the third quarter when the games are getting away from them, and that's to be expected. You know, I wish I had something deeper for you. The Pelicans are going to need to get creative. We're looking for silver linings, moral victories right now, and just hope that they can get healthy sooner rather than later. But we don't know, and these injuries are just rough, and it just is just some of the worst luck I have ever seen. But that's just really what it is and how it's going to go. So if you are going to try and play for wins and things like that, you've got to go out and then do something creative. I like the emphasis on offensive rebounding. I think that's something that you're going to see against Denver and the Lakers, and maybe that'll make enough of a difference, and guys step up being at home that you can get 1-2 wins there. But even them, the Pelicans won't be favored in either of those games. So coming up next, let's look at the area that like truly lost the Pelicans the game here, and that was the turnovers. That was rough in this game. Was that an OKC thing, or is there something that the Pelicans can do to try and alleviate some of the damage that's been caused there? Let's look at that. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by my go-to ticketing app, Game Time. Look, I love going to games, just the social aspect of it. Look, even when they're bad, it's just fun to go to the arena, hang out with people, watch some like just professional athletes do awesome things. The sights, the sounds, there's nothing like being there. So I love just going to live events in general, and that's why Game Time is my go-to ticketing app, because they make it easy. And I love all the features that they have. And they have a new feature right now called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. And Game Time Picks is going to filter out all that fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. So whether it's a Pelicans game or whether you're looking for comedy, theater, concerts, whatever it is, Game Time's going to be able to help you out and hook you up here, because they have some of the best prices I've seen. And with Game Time Picks, you're filtering out all those like terribly priced tickets here. And if you're going to a new venue, You get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. And I always toggle the all-in pricing. When you toggle this up front, it's going to show you the total amount, no surprise fees at checkout. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen. Today and every day, we're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube. And now we've got a newsletter. Introducing the Locked On Pelicans daily newsletter, one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com. Scroll down, you'll see the Locked On Pelicans logo. Click on that, put in your email, and boom, it's going to be in your inbox every single day over at LockedOnDaily.com. Start your day with the all-new free Locked On Pelicans newsletter. We have league coverage in there too. One big story from around the league that's like 500 words or less from some really great writers. Fantasy basketball coverage is in there too for you. You've got to check it out. It's worth subscribing. So let's look at the area that the Pelicans lost this game. Look, they lost it for a variety of reasons beyond the lack of talent, but one thing is going to jump out at you, and that was the turnovers in this one. 23 turnovers here, and that led to 34 fast break points for the Oklahoma City Thunder in an 18-point game. Think about that one for a second. Pelicans, by contrast, two fast break points. They lost that battle by 32 in an 18-point game. Now, OKC has a dominant defense. They are really good, and they're really long, and they force turnovers. Their defense was ranked first coming into the league. That's not going to be changing here. They are #1 at forcing turnovers. So part of this is just an OKC thing. But turnovers have been a bit of an issue for the New Orleans Pelicans, throughout the season here. And a lot of this, I do think, is tied to the injuries. Because when you look at this team, let me ask you this question. It's a rhetorical question, but I'll ask it anyway. Do they seem hard to defend? Does this team seem hard to defend? The answer is no. They're real easy to defend. Part of the time is they're just not really running offense, it feels like, and that's a big problem, and that makes it easier to defend. But the other part is, look, there's just not a lot of talent out here on the court for the most part, and there's only so much you can do. Teams aren't scared of Yves Missi. They're not scared of Javonte Green. They're scared of Brandon Ingram. They're scared of Trey Murphy. They're somewhat scared of Brandon Boston Jr. But when 3 of your 5 starters are threats and 2 of them aren't offensive threats. And look, Missi did what he could, 10 points on 5 of 5 shooting. That's good. But it's not like he's like a guy that's going to like kill opponents, and they're fine with letting him score because that means other guys aren't. So when you have some of these just non-offensive threats, Javonte Green went 1 of 10 in this game for 2 points, right? It's easy to defend. You can throw 2 at Brandon Ingram. You can throw 2 at Trey Murphy. You can even throw like 2 at Brandon Boston Jr. and do all this because you're just going to hide bad defenders on Yves Missi and Javonte Green, and those guys likely aren't going to burn the opponent here. They're not going to make the opponents pay for the defensive strategy. If you're an everyday or a longtime listener, you've heard me say that a lot when it comes to Zion Williamson. You double him, you need other guys that are going to make the team pay for doing that. You double Brandon Ingram right now, do you have guys on the court that are going to make the opponent pay? And the answer is no. Because you can throw 2 at Brandon Ingram, throw 3 at Brandon Ingram, and still be able to defend Trey Murphy and still be able to defend Brandon Boston Jr. because you're leaving those other guys open. And when you look at the rest of the roster, like there's no one you could put in that's going to really make a difference here. Trey Jemison, Jeremiah Robinson Earl for Yves Missi, neither are going to be threats. For Javonte Green, pick who's better. Jamal Cain, Jalen Noel, Antonio Reeves. That's who played in this game. Maybe they'll get Jordan Hawkins back soon, and that becomes another threat out there, and at least you have some of that. But of the guys that are healthy and playing right now, like none of them are threats. Like this team is just so shorthanded. There's not a whole lot they can do. So when you become easy to defend, look, it's going to lead to turnovers. When you throw 2 guys at Brandon Ingram, and you trap him, like it's going to potentially result in a turnover. That's how that works. That's why you do that strategy. Now, if there were other threats out there, maybe they wouldn't, because you worry about Brandon Ingram firing off a quick pass, and his passing this year has been really good, probably the best I've ever seen from him, truthfully. And look, he did what he could in this game. 18 points on 7 of 18 shots, 4 of 8 from 3, but the turnovers were rough. He had 8 of them in this game. I don't really fault him for this. Like, what else is going to happen here? Brandon Boston Jr., 6 turnovers here. The Oklahoma City Thunder were really pressing the point of attack, and you're seeing also a lot of teams picking up the Pelicans full court, and that's proven to be kind of effective. You'll see the Lakers definitely do that. We'll see about the Denver Nuggets this weekend. So there's only so much you can do here with the lack of guys, but that's where they lost this game, was the 23 turnovers. You don't get any points on that, and now they're turning it into points on the other end. Those are zero, it's a zero-sum thing, right? You get 0, they're getting something, and not exactly how that's explained, but you get what I mean. That, if you could get 1 point out of it, it'd be fine, but that's not what you're getting, right? It's 0 for you. It's an empty possession, and then it's a really high valuable possession for the Thunder. That's what lost this Pelicans team that game. If they don't turn the ball over as much, they could have, they probably still lose. It's just closer. They did a good job trying to shoot threes, 37 attempts in this one. Now, they only made 9 of them, whereas the Thunder made 15 on 39 attempts. It's a 38.5% percentage for them, 24.3 for New Orleans. So they're doing what they can. But cutting down on the turnovers is going to be big. I don't have an easy solution or an easy answer for you when it comes to that. That might be you've got to run some better ball screens, but look, that just means they're going to kind of try and trap you. But it also, I do think, means you need to involve your best players in these actions. Brandon Ingram and Trey Murphy. One of the things you saw was Brandon Ingram was passing the ball away because he didn't want to get double teamed to potentially turn it over, and then the Pelicans weren't able to really get him back involved in the play. They need to go back and get him more involved in the action. If he passes it to Trey, kind of move around, set a screen for Trey, and get closer to the ball to try and just put some pressure on the defense rather than just letting a lot of these guys go one-on-one when it comes to it. That's a big part of the problem here. That's on the coaching, and that's on the lack of creativity on offense, which has been a problem for multiple years now, and you're really seeing it rear its head here. They could have won that Nets game if they had just scored 2 points down the stretch, and they didn't score for 3.5 minutes. That's what they need to really work on here. And, to me, it's like, will the coaching staff actually do that? I couldn't tell you. But you've got to get creative and run certain sets and actions to try and avoid those sorts of turnovers here, because that's what killed New Orleans in this. I don't want to say this was a winnable game. I don't think it was for the Pelicans, but you could have made it closer. And while I think they fought, I liked the effort from the guys. I don't have a ton to complain about given the injuries here, right? We could scream at 23 turnovers, but some of these guys are just playing so far out of their league right now. But the coaching staff can do something. It doesn't mean you don't do anything, you just roll over and die, right? You can do something, and I don't think the Pelicans are doing a good enough job when it comes to that to try and help themselves here, right? One of the coach's jobs needs to be putting players in position to succeed, and I don't know if you're seeing that from the coaching staff right now. They're injured. There's a limitation here, right? Some of these lineups have never played together. Some of these guys have just never really played. Jalen Noel has been on the team for 10 days, 2 weeks, something like that, right? There's no chemistry there. You don't know exactly what his strengths are and how he can complement the team and all that stuff like that. That's a big part of the problem here. But you can do more than you're doing, and the Pelicans definitely need to try and find a way to do that these next couple games. Otherwise, look, this is going to get rough, y'all. Then I'm not sure where the next win is going to come from, what things are going to look like. That's what you're kind of waiting to see from this team. They do need to wake up, I think, a little bit and start to try and figure something out. I think they're going to be capable of doing that. It's just, of course they're capable of doing it. It's just, will they? And that's kind of the big question right now. Look, it's not trending in a good way for New Orleans, and we'll talk more later in the week about tanking next week and that stuff, and we'll kind of briefly look at it tomorrow, I think, in the show. We'll see. Just get healthy sooner rather than later. We'll find out. I think you're going to start to see or hear about some guys returning pretty soon. That'll at least be encouraging, but is it going to be too little too late? That's going to be kind of the big question here. Those are things we're going to be talking about over at over on the Locked On Pelicans podcast. So coming up next, let's look at Brandon Boston Jr., let's look at Yves Missi. I also want to take kind of a bit of a deep dive on Trey Jemison as well. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So get ready to tackle the NFL season and the NBA season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Look, the Oklahoma City Thunder were favored by 14.5, minus 14.5 going into this one. They beat the spread right there. You know, maybe it's time to fade the Pelicans a little bit. And if you want to do that, just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You're going to get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And now for your second listen, go check out the Locked On Saints podcast. Maybe there's some new energy over there. They're going to turn things around for the New Orleans Saints. That would be great. Ross Jackson making sense of everything black and gold over the Locked On Saints podcast. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Also on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So let's start to wrap up with a couple of good performances. I like what we saw from Yves Missi in this game here. He was 5 of 5 from the field, 10 points, 10 rebounds, 4 of them offensive, sticking to the game plan. Look, he's been fine. Like, I don't think he's elite or anything like that. He looks like a starting center at the NBA level. That's been really good to see. You know, there's only so much he can do defensively. It takes a team. One guy doesn't completely change it. He's not there yet, but he is impacting the court. You actually saw a couple of the OKC players like scared of him, like not wanting to go near him and wanting to kind of get into his airspace because they were worried about their shots getting blocked. I don't know. That's an encouraging thing to see from a guy like that. So I was happy to see how he played in this one. Thought he played pretty well, continuing just to grow. And look, he didn't get in foul trouble, anything like that. That's always like just an incredibly impressive thing. You didn't have one foul in this game. Speaking of fouling, one thing that I thought was impressive was Trey Murphy getting pulled early with 3 fouls and then getting subbed back into the game. I liked this from head coach Willie Green, trusting his players. Look, he knew this is going to be an uphill battle for New Orleans, and you're only going to win if you have your best guys out there on the court. And I love this move because you see this often. Trey Murphy gets 3 fouls early, gets pulled, then goes back in and doesn't commit a foul the rest of the game. Yeah, part of that is he's changing his play style, being a little bit less aggressive on defense, but it also speaks a lot to him to just not get in foul trouble and be out there as one of the few guys that's an offensive threat. I told y'all it was going to take him a little bit to find his rhythm back. He was 4 of 12, 14 points, 2 of 8 from 3 here. But overall, to not foul anymore is a pretty encouraging sign just in terms of Trey being Trey. Brandon Boston Jr. struggled shooting in this one, but he finds a way to make an impact, and that's what I find impressive about him. 3 of 10 from the field here for just 8 points. Fewer points than shot attempts is never a good thing. 10 rebounds, though, 4 assists. Look, with that defensive pressure from the OKC Thunder, that was tough. Like, that was just tough. There's nothing else to say here. Antonio Reeves got some run late in the game. He has a nice little, like, off-the-glass game. He has that little kind of, like, shot put, bank shot down, and it was cool to see him get some run. He was 3 of 5, 6 points, 0 for 2. Look, he's got an opportunity. When he gets out on the court, he's got to make the most of it. That was at least somewhat encouraging to see from him, even if it was largely in garbage time in the second half, though we got a couple of first half minutes as well. Trey Jemison, I thought, was interesting to watch in this game. You know, I was somewhat high going in on him, and the more I watched him, you know, I even told you all this. Like, I thought he would get some run, but I don't find him to be a particularly good defensive rebounder. So while we'd like to see the big 6'11" man maybe be your starter if you want to play, you know, or could be, it's Yves Missi, but like have a role going forward because you figure that's a bigger body. And if you can't play small the whole time, he's going to need to kind of fill some of those minutes. But he's really not a good defensive rebounder, in my opinion. He did okay on the defensive glass here, not great. He is a good offensive rebounder, and the Pelicans took advantage of that and were really pushing for those offensive boards when he was out there on the court, and he battled grabbing 4 of them. That dude's hands, though, are so bad. His hands are made out of stone. His hands are made out of stone. He can't catch anything. If he had good hands, he could be good. I actually think he doesn't. It limits what you can do with him. Like, he can't catch the ball. It actually hurts him a little bit when he's trying to grab some rebounds, too. 3 turnovers wasn't great. Did have 2 blocks. Look, he's a big body. Maybe you need somebody like that to be a bit of a bruiser, but he's not a back-to-the-basket guy. He's not like a post-up guy that's going to slowly black you down, like a la Jonas Valanciunas or something like that. That, you know, it makes you feel like he looks like he should be, but he's not. I think there's very clear limitations on him. I wouldn't be shocked if they give Carlo some run. A lot of people are asking, why isn't Carlo Makovic getting any run out there? Look, there's an opportunity for him to play. If they're not playing him, they haven't seen it from him in practice and training camp and preseason and all of that. He needs to get that run in the G League first. I'm sure he will get a chance later, but if he could do anything, he would be playing. I think that's kind of how Willie Green views him right now, but there still might be an opportunity for him to get some run just because of all the injuries that this team is facing, and you're seeing Daniel Tice kind of fall out of the rotation right now, didn't play at all in this game. Let me know your big takeaways. If you're, it's tough to find silver linings in a losing streak like this, but I do think the idea of crashing the glass is going to be good. I have an offensive tweak for y'all that I want to see them make. We're going to go into that in tomorrow's episode that I think could really open things up too for them in this back-to-back set against the Denver Nuggets and the Los Angeles Lakers. I'll let you know what that is going to be. It involves Brandon Ingram. See if you can guess it in the comments down below. And that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. Don't forget, subscribe to the newsletter over at LockedOnDaily.com. Check out Locked On Saints and subscribe to Locked On Pelicans wherever you get your podcasts. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I appreciate y'all so much for listening and sticking with it through this rough stretch. It'll get better eventually. And there's interesting things here to watch too. And we'll start talking a little bit of tanking. I actually think it's an interesting conversation. That's coming up next week and a little bit tomorrow on the Locked On Pelicans podcast. See y'all next time.